There's thousands and upon thousands of people in my position who have waited and waited for the not only to be believed but the answers to why we were abused, what drove the perpetrators to abuse.
My perpetrator said, you know, we're allowed to do this to you as long as we don't enjoy it, because it says in the Quran. Unless at some point we are brave enough to say this is wrong and these are false things that are being taught, it's not going to stop.
I think it's so important that people learn from Rotherham, Telford, Rochdale, all the other places, that parents, communities, even school teachers, they need to know the signs.
Men of Asian origin are no more likely to be prosecuted for sexual crimes than anyone else. But when it comes to convictions for street grooming, British Asians, mainly of Pakistani heritage, do appear overrepresented. It's a contentious subject. Even mentioning their ethnicity has drawn accusations of racism. More than a year ago, in the midst of toxic debate, the government announced a review into the characteristics of street grooming gangs.
Most of the men in recent high-profile gang convictions have had Pakistani heritage. This behaviour is a disgrace to that heritage. So I've instructed my officials to look into this unflinchingly, and where the evidence suggests that there are certain cultural factors driving this, I will not hesitate to act.
Being in Rotherham is a reminder of the horrific scale of what happened in this town. 1,400 children were raped, abused, trafficked, beaten, passed around. And that astounding number is believed to be a conservative estimate. Elizabeth was just 14 when it started. She was initially groomed by a white woman she says had converted to Islam.
She'd bring these men for her own gain, packets of cigarettes, gas, electric, things like that.
And then you had to have sex with them?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. And did you ever at any point think you could get away?
Because the grooming process, it starts off as what you see as fun until you get more into that circle. And the more you get into that circle, the more it goes round and you can't get out. It's just had this power over me. If they'd have come to me now as a 31-year-old and said the things that they said then, I'd just laugh at them. But as a child, what's not only been mentally, physically and sexually abused, you don't think that way.
Towns like Rotherham and here Telford have become known for this particular kind of grooming. As a teenager, befriended and then raped by one man, this woman was then passed around to others. She was sometimes locked in a room until she agreed to sex.
Do you have any understanding or memory of how many times you were raped and by how many different people over the period?
I think it was around 100 men, and I'm proud of that. Like, nobody realises how proud I am about how small that number is. Other girls that I've met who have been abused have been raped by a lot more men than me. It's just continuous.
So sorry.
It's okay. It's just like literally continuous harassment, like all the time.
The government promised to investigate what drives these crimes, but it's not keen to tell us what it's found out. The Home Office told Newsnight no public report will be published as a consequence of this work, which it said is the case with most fact-finding work undertaken by officials in the course of policy development. After months of wrangling with Newsnight, the Home Office's Freedom of Information Unit is still refusing to tell us what it has gathered, in part because disclosure would reveal information about ongoing investigations, and some of the information is considered to contain personal information. But even the research findings are under wraps to give the safe space necessary for ministers and officials to consider policy options in private. MPs from towns where this abuse happened want full disclosure. Barry Shearman signed a letter nearly 2 years ago demanding the government investigate what motivates the groomers.
The Home Office should publish the report in full. For too long, I've been frustrated that the fact of the matter is that we have not had a proper inquiry. We do not know. Well, I can't quote, well, the research shows that this happens. These are the causal reasons this behaviour happened. These girls have been through hell. Why don't we use what they went through to learn the lessons and do something positive?
The far right has used the grooming scandals for its own ends, exploiting the vacuum created by the authorities' failures and the lack of definitive research.
When I found out that they were going to do this review, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air.
Jane Senior blew the whistle on what was happening in Rotherham. As a youth worker, she'd spent years trying to alert the authorities to what children were telling her.
As a country, we're getting quite split, aren't we? We've got, you know, people from far right and from left arguing constantly over what's gone off, not only in Rotherham but in other towns and other areas. And I just think that this would have given us some of the answers.
What drove these men is hotly contested. Some put gang grooming abuse down to nighttime opportunity and economic deprivation. They say that in places like Rotherham, where they were running the taxi firms and takeaways, British Asian criminals had access to their victims.
What we know about these gangs is that they almost always engage in other criminal activity, typically drugs. And so I think the demographics in terms of the socio-economic factors that drive young people in particular towards drugs and crime and gang-related crime, I think those are factors which explain why a disproportionate number of people are from that heritage, that background.
Others disagree. This grooming gang survivor calls what happened to her anti-Western religious and racist abuse.
When I was a victim, I was raped multiple times, I was beaten, I was tortured, and throughout all of that I was constantly being racially abused. There was a constant barrage of you're a white slag, you're a white whore, you're a fucking gory, which is the Pakistani word for white person. So the racist abuse was non-stop. The religious abuse is real. I was taught it as a type of othering, like our Pakistani girls are good and pure and they cover themselves, they're virgins till they're married, but white girls are trash, they're whores, they all sleep with hundreds of men, they're all worthless. I don't think it's good to hide this information.
This Islamic scholar campaigns for better interfaith relations. He told Newsnight his religion does not justify grooming crimes, but he does believe that the attitudes to the West that some British Muslims hold could encourage these offences, what he says is controversial.
The problem here is that these people have been raised up to see the non-Muslim community as kafir, as infidel, as unworthy of living on God's earth, etc., etc. When you categorize people as kafir, non-believer, then use this word in a derogatory way, then you start to underrate them and look at them as less a human being, or perhaps not a human being, not a people worthy of respect. And therefore, you could do anything with them. And this is wrong.
Given that we know that a disproportionate number of perpetrators come from Asian, Muslim, Pakistani background, whatever classification that you want to use, it doesn't follow the drivers, the things that drive those individuals to carry out those crimes is their upbringing is a culture. The reason why I can say that is because those individuals are small in number. The vast majority of people from that community, the vast majority of people that share that heritage don't conduct themselves in a way, they don't behave in that manner, and they find those actions abhorrent and reprehensible.
Shaista Gahir from Muslim Women's Network believes the groomers are driven purely by misogyny. For a report in 2013, she spoke to Muslim girls who were also attacked.
Pakistani men feature quite highly in the research that the Muslim Women's Network did, where Muslim girls were being also groomed and raped, and the experiences are no less horrific.
For you, if it's not about faith, is there anything in a sort of cultural explanation for why these particular perpetrators are carrying out these kinds of crimes?
Pakistan is one of the worst countries to be a woman in the world, and when young lads are being brought up, and then, you know, and they're seeing their aunties, their grannies, their mums, their cousins, and being treated as second-class citizens. And then you've got, you know, British-born lads that are seeing this culture. And then if you look at where some of these cases have come from, they're in towns that are not particularly integrated as well. So I think it's quite a complex mixture, and that's why if some research was done, it might uncover this.
So what do the women who survived grooming abuse think motivated their abusers?
There is like a cultural element to it. They didn't care that I was a nice person, or they didn't care on like morally how I was. They hated me anyway. There's enough knowledge out there now for them to know what they're doing. If they have a dislike for white women and they think that white women are sluts and are slags, and they have sex in a hateful way because they think those women deserve it, I think that those perpetrators, they know.
I can't sit here and say for definite that it's a Pakistani problem, because there ain't any proper statistics around it. I didn't give much hope that we would actually get that report anyway.
Why not?
If I'm honest, because we never get answers to anything. 18 years of my life has been unanswered.
A lot of truth came out of Rotherham, but also some myths. You know, and the myths were that every single one of these children were white girls, and every single one of the abusers were Pakistani men that were taxi drivers or worked in takeaways. And that's not true. But Rotherham's known for their myths.
And what is true?
So the truth is, yeah, a lot of them were girls and a lot of them were white. But what about the girls that we work with from the Pakistani community and the Roma community that were also abused? What about the women, not a lot of women, but some of the white women that facilitated these children being abused? And what about our boys and young men? People want answers, people need to know, because the answers might not necessarily be what people are expecting them to be.
As a victim, I was repeatedly told that I am worthless, that I am a piece of scum, that I am white trash, that I am a whore. I was repeatedly told all these terrible things. But now, as an adult, many years later, I don't believe any of that. That's not true. And I've come to terms with who I am, and it's not who they say I am.
Who are you?
I'm a good person. I'm a human being. It's the same as all of the victims are. We're all human beings, and we're all precious and valuable, and none of us deserve what has been done to us.
What these women do believe they deserve, though, is answers. That's what they demand from the Home Office, publication of the findings of its research. They say they have the right to know.